On the Block. A podcast about authentic people doing beautiful things. Enjoy the show.
Program, folks. Andy Gervich here. Man, as we come to the end of 2016, what a year, huh? I don't need to remind you of all the people we lost this year. Just from an entertainment standpoint, I'm thinking of Gene Wilder and David Bowie and Leonard Cohen, Prince, so many more. And then, of course, with the election season not turning out the way many folks have planned, I've been watching a sort of collective PTSD go across the country and across the world, and a lot of people I care about. With an upcoming guest on the show who you're going to be very excited about. I'm not going to mention who that is just for anonymity's sake when you hear what I have to say next, who had to cancel the interview yesterday because they had to speak unexpectedly with a grad student of theirs who was feeling suicidal since the election. And I've been seeing that a lot on social media. A lot of progressive folks really bowled over and fearful and disoriented and shocked and scared about all the things that seem to be on the horizon with this new administration. And, I'm not here with any answers, unfortunately, and I'm not here to tell you that it's all going to be okay. Except for I am sort of here to tell you it's all going to be okay, but maybe not in the way that you think I am and that other people are talking about. It might not be okay in the short term, and it might not be okay in terms of any measurable kind of success or safety that we in a materialist universe hope to attain for ourselves and for each other. But, a dear friend of the show, Dami J. Shoemaker, as a lot of folks know, is dealing with the imminent death of their mother. Dami had to leave to go out of state the other day to see their mother, who had a massive stroke and who is now heading into hospice care. My mother was a hospice nurse, is recently deceased, and her and I were estranged. So when I hear stories like this, especially from people I care about, it's always very gripping. Dami put a Facebook status up the other day that said, their mom has been moved into hospice. She'll be passing on soon, and that it's all okay. And these are Dami's words. It's all going to be okay. We are all part of this grander cycle of life, of birth, life, and death, and rebirth. And, to watch Dami come to that realization, it's easy to say, something we all can sort of affirm rationally, but sitting at the bedside of your dying mother, who's just had a massive stroke, to come to that realization is a powerful one, right? In those moments of profound, agonizing, unthinkable loss, sometimes we can be hit with the awareness that everything is constantly in a state of flux. We are sojourners in this consciousness, and this is the one time, the one life we have to spread love into the world. And I think if anything, for a lot of us, this recent presidential election, unfortunately, was a wake-up call that we are all we have. We are all that we have in terms of being there for each other and walking each other home, walking each other towards the light and all of the various capacities that means, both in this life and for the next, whatever that means for you. So it's a wild and reflective and deeply symbolic time that I hope all of us are using to go further into ourselves and figure out how are we going to go forward together? What are we going to make as we stand at the front end of the next mass extinction on our planet? Barely any giraffes left, barely any elephants left. Lots of people, right? But lots of people that are at each other's throats, that have such differing views on climate and on immigration and on God and on gender. We got to come together. And I don't know how else to put it. I say the same thing. I hit the same gong every week about unity and transformation. And sometimes I wonder if anybody's listening. But there's a reason that all of the great mystics of the world, that all of the great sages of the world have said that we have to find an immaterial path, a spiritual path towards a profound and unshakable connectivity. And if we can't manage that, it would be very, very difficult for our species to survive. And I think this wisdom is not something that has gone out of style. It's not something that is out of fashion, that it's actually more relevant now than it ever has been. Shout out to Dami and to her family, and to their family, during this difficult time. Our guest this week is somebody that Dami actually introduced to the show, and we speak about Dami briefly in our conversation with this week's guest, but we don't get into it nearly enough. This is a person that just showers the world with love and light and service, and everything that Dami Shoemaker touches, including the lives that Dami touches, are never the same. Whether it's curating the Burnt Tongue reading series, as initially as a testament to the wonderful work of Tom Spanbauer and others. And then blossoming out recently as Tom has gotten sick and has been more reclusive, to celebrate all of the other wonderful writers in the Northwest, whether it's helping to launch the Lydia Yuknovich's corporeal writing series, which has been so powerful and transformative for so many people in this writing community and around the country and around the world, or all of the decades of activism that Dami has done. Just an essential, irreplaceable member of our community here, and we just send all the love and support we can to Dami in this difficult time. And Dami, as I said, brought our guest this week to us, and so we are thankful for that too. Reema Zaman says some amazing things about her work, and there's one thing that I really love that Reema says. She says, pain, insecurity, trials, anger, confusion, the near reckless desire to love and be loved deeply, these are our common specialities. Our fault lines are where our paths intersect, where your shards align with mine. Reasons to never feel less or better than anyone. Reasons to never feel alone. How lovely that being human soothes the ache of being human. I love that last line. It reminds me a lot of the Leonard Cohen sentiment that there's a crack in everything. And that's how the light gets in, and we lost Leonard this year as well. Reema is an author, an artist, an academic, a model, an actress, just a multi-talented performance artist, activist, and just all-around dynamo. We were introduced to Reema, as I said, through Dami when Reema came and read at the Burnt Tongue series recently here in Portland, Oregon, and did a performance art piece from a chapter of her forthcoming book, her memoir, I Am Yours, that blew us away. It was performed from memory on stage, and it captivated the room. And we'll get into it in our conversation, so I won't say too much more about it here. But what a presence, what a force for life and love and transformation. And to get to sit with somebody with such an international awareness and an international pedigree, it's a rare thing. We got a lot of folks squawking about multiculturalism nowadays and how this is, we're at the end of neoliberalism and the end of multiculturalism. And I think we might be at the end of neoliberalism, which I think is a fabulous thing and also a conversation for another day. But multiculturalism, I hit this over and over again in our conversations here. To quote the Quran, which I know for all our alt-right listeners have already turned off, but to quote the Quran, Allah says in the Quran, "I made you into different nations so that you may know one another." I say this on a regular basis on this show. To me, God is a word that means other, capital O, other. And to serve God, all the religions of the world realize that as people start living in greater density with one another, with people that they might not have actually grown up around for multiple generations as we were in tribal societies, that we need some kind of reminder, we need some kind of template or algorithm to help us generate access to these forms of mythological and symbolic consciousness that will help us have empathy and love and patience for one another and not just devour one another. And so God is a phrase that means other, big O, other than you. And so to serve other is to put the needs of others ahead of your own needs. And we do that by serving little o, other, right? The oldest ethic is the hospitality ethic. When there's a stranger in your midst, a traveler in your midst, you welcome them in, you feed them, you clothe them, you bathe them, you give them medicine. And all they have to give you in return is gratitude and a story, their story of their travels and who they are and where they're from. This ethic of being kind to one another, of embracing one another's differences as being shards of this shared humanity, this is as old as civilization itself and even older. And Reema is a person who, from Bangladesh to Hawaii to Thailand to here in the United States, has gathered these nuggets of wisdom and experience and brought them here to share with us on the show. And she's just fantastic work, relevant work. She's doing a lot of really great activism that combines spoken word and drama, parts of her book, parts of her theater background with a sort of engaged interactive component with young women and young people to talk about their ownership of their own bodies and how to navigate a culture that sometimes seeks to devour rather than empower young women and girls. So we just couldn't have been happier to have her on the program to finish the year with her. These last couple episodes for the year I think you're really going to enjoy, folks. We put our hearts into them and just couldn't be more pleased with the results. So Reema Zaman coming to you. She has a religion background as well that we didn't even get into, so we're going to have to get her back on the show at some point to talk about that. But get over to our site, get over to her website to check out the amazing work she does, Dear Reema. She responds to reader letters and an advice column. You can see a performance of her work. Check out some of the other stuff she's doing. It's phenomenal stuff. Empowering, hopeful, engaged action. That's what it's all about going forward, right? She's a person who puts her entire being into her art and into her presence, and it is very accessible, it's very captivating, and it's very transformative. We need each other now more than ever. We need each other's voices now more than ever. We need each other's art now more than ever, and each other's activism and support. And Reema is a model for that, a template for all of us going forward, a very proud and courageous and wise and complex voice that we should all be listening to. Okay, enjoy the show. Enjoy the rest of your holiday shopping and holiday madness. Please stay with us through the end of the year. We got a great episode coming next week with an old friend of mine, Pastor John Voles. And again, big love to Dami Shoemaker and their family during this time. We love you so much, folks, and we will see you on the other side.
We are kneeling at the river's edge and tempting all the steps to follow closer right behind. Is it only when you feel the pot is empty that it's gnawing at the corners of your mind? I will ask you for mercy. I will come to you blind. What you'll see is the worst me, not the last of my kind. Oh, in the muddy water we're falling. Oh, in the muddy water we're crawling. Hold me down, hold me now, so me up. It's not clear why we choose the fire pathway. Where we end is not the way that we had planned. All the spirits gather round like it's our last day. To get across, you know we'll have to raise the sand. Oh, I will ask you for mercy. I will come to you blind. What you'll see is the worst me, and not the last of my kind.
We scurry, each person in a different stage of gritty swift. It's rare to find a born and raised New Yorker. Most of us have come here with a fervent mission, arriving on the wings of a wish. We plunge into the flow, weave our narrative with each other's, and move as one pulsing organism. I emerge from underground. The crisp evening envelops me in a gulp. I turn the corner and stumble into an old colleague, an actor like myself, a friend. What a great surprise, he says. It's been so long. Dinner? Friday? Sure. We met a few years ago in the summer between my sophomore and junior year in college while working at Williamstown, a renowned theater festival. He was a bit older than me in graduate school at Brown. We became close friends the way everyone does in a community of artists. In the performance arts, we cultivate closeness through specific practices. For weeks or months, we do exercises to foster trust and loyalty and love. We divulge achingly personal stories. We spend long hours rehearsing in the studio, on stage, and on the road. Therefore, by the time we perform, you believe that we are family, siblings, best friends, or lovers. As actors, it's our job to communicate intimacy. Thus, once two actors have worked together, we are allied for life. We are part of a larger loving tribe, generations deep. It's understood we don't assign this. Dinner is wonderful. He's wearing a button-down shirt and jeans. I'm wearing a short sundress and ballet flats. We share stories and laugh. My apartment is around the corner, so I invite him up for tea. We talk and feel the attraction. He kisses me, I kiss him back. It's all delightfully harmless. It's getting late. I walk into the front door adjacent to my bedroom. Good night, thank you for a great time. He wants more. He kisses me again, harder. He pushes me against the wall, my 5'4", 105 pounds, feeling pitiful to his 5'11", 180 pounds. You have to leave. I keep my voice light but persuasive. He tries to force me onto the bed, forcefully, not remotely, playfully. I hold my ground. No, you have to go. No, he says, grinning, his teeth glowing in the darkness. I am not going anywhere. The air has thickened like blood clotting. Dread curls around the edges of the room like the scent of rain before the sky slips open. He comes towards me, I back away. I breathe through my nose to calm my lungs and pace my heart. My mind sifts through every case study and self-defense lesson memorized in college as a women's studies student. I bolster myself with tactics, place one hand on each side of his head, dig hard into his eyes with my thumbs, knee him in the groin, bite, kick, scream, urinate. The shock and disgust might unsettle him, letting me run. He grabs me. I steel my body against his, twisting my torso and arms the way I was taught to do with assaulters. But the vital truth, as bitter as vital, he is much too strong. I fight with all my might, flaying like a fish caught on a hook. He keeps his hold on me and the tussle flings us onto the bed. My left cheek is pressed against his shoulder and turned towards the wall. My room is pink. I painted it this way, pink with a daisy yellow trim. Growing up, I'd always wanted a pink room. There's a Benjamin Moore, a block down from my agent's office. The day I signed with him, I gave myself a pink room. I'm trying to create something soft for myself within the black and gray bruise that is New York. Life can be so surprising. Just as crayons fail to taste like their names, paint on a wall will be much brighter than paint in a can. I envisioned a light blush pink, but ended up with pink as vivid as flesh, sliced open. Now, I'm inside a mouth. Lining the flesh pink walls are stacks of books, arranged in a way I think is pretty. My bed frame is lovely too. Black wrought iron in a delicate pattern of leaves and flowers, much like the tattoo on my ribcage. It tucked in that small spot between my breasts. I chose that spot believing no one would ever find it unless invited. I found my bed frame on Craigslist. It didn't come with a bed spring, so I balanced it on plywood boards. I haven't stopped fighting. I'm still trying to wiggle out from beneath him. He's pinned my wrist above my head, first with both his hands, and then with only one. With the other hand, he's undone his jeans and hiked up my dress. Now he knees apart my legs and enters. As he jams in, I force myself to imagine that what I am feeling is an inanimate instrument, like those found in a gynecologist's office, which, given my age, I've only been to thrice. Now he grunts and grunts, his upper lip, forehead, palms, and torso growing clammy with sweat, saturating the room with his scent, musky male yet acutely his own. Cracking like lightning, the wooden boards beneath my mattress break from our combined weight and exertion. The mattress tilts like a split bone, it juts into the air at an awkward angle, shaking with each thrust. The broken boards scratch my flesh-pink walls. You're just too beautiful, he says, hissing between groans. Astonishing, the power of the human word. Through a meager handful of sound and suggestion, I feel guilt for being myself and fury for having it used against me. I wish to be anyone but myself, to be anything but attractive, to disappear and remain hidden indefinitely. I wish these things and I hate him for it. I've looked left, right, and down, and so now I look into him. His sounds, scent, and desire have filled the room full of him, yet he's completely left. His pupils have dilated so deeply his entire eyes look black, dulled of light, dead of any humanity. I'm still repeating, you have to go, you have to go, you have to go, though I don't know whom I'm referring to, him or myself. I'd be happy for either one of us to vanish. Now I switch to saying, no, 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 spitting the words like seeds I won't take. Here we are. This is happening. The horrifying certainty hits me in the face like raw steak slamming a chopping board. Perhaps because he too believes this is an assured reality, his hold on my wrist slackens. This moment of sloth is all I need. I slip my wrist out from his hands, press the heels of my palms against his shoulders, and push with all my might. No! I yell. The sudden volume and physical force are enough to shock him backwards. He comes at the same time he falls. If this weren't rape, if I weren't terrified, if my voice weren't hoarse from being ignored, I'd be embarrassed for him. I scoot back until I'm against the wall, hugging my legs onto my chest. I throw his chapped and taste blood. I must have bitten my tongue. It'll hurt tomorrow. Silently, swiftly, he puts on his clothes. I say it once more. Leave! He does. After his words, you're just too beautiful. He hasn't said a thing. I don't call anyone for help. I sit in the dark for 15 minutes, listing my options and weighing the cost of each. I'm here on my OPT visa, my agents will sponsor my next visa, and if I obtain enough professional credits, I can accrue a green card. Every minute and penny is devoted towards the next meal, next audition, next job, next rent check. I am working so hard to live here. The fine print behind my immigrant status claims I'm not to be treated any differently than an American woman, but often the fine print fails to inform reality. Similarly, the minutiae behind immigration include nothing to suggest that pressing charges against a rapist could compromise my status, or when I apply for a green card. But all it takes is for my case to land in the hands of that one immigration officer who finds pleasure in turning the innocuous into injury. I cannot harm my chances for living here. I love America beyond words. I haven't a place in Bangladesh. But here, I can pursue the life I want, to be a voice for those without one. The irony is acutely painful. I won't press charges. I have to be quiet now to be a voice for others later. The hardest fact to reconcile is that my silence allows him the wicked freedom to do this to other women. This thought of hypothetical others brands me with guilt. What now? Get him off you. I take a shower. Scrolling down and along the walls of the stock exchange are statistics and stories I've learned and lived as a girl and student. What a twisted joke. I feel the inertia of tears build, and with them my heartbeat, sounding like the decisive march of soldiers, resolute and incoming. So immense grows my panic that it drowns out the sound of water and sucks in my breath. I begin to choke. Stop! Breathe. I breathe. This is anger and self-pity, two faces of fear. Fear, another luxury I cannot afford. My story. He is but one page, one character. It doesn't occur to me for a second to feel somehow small, dirty, or damaged. This wasn't sex, this was assault. He is not a man, nor all men combined, he is one predator. He is a scab, and Mama taught me not to pick scabs, especially if they're human. Under my makeshift waterfall, I speak these words. They bloom, then distill into one sentence. Only I author my life. I step out of the water. Now, the wrecked bed. I return the wooden slats to their precarious balance, angling them on the thin lip of metal, making sure they don't succumb to gravity. I lift the mattress. I smile, not from the strength in my arms, but from the lack of trembling in my hands. I sleep. The next day arrives, followed by another. The days form into months, months into years. I don't hear from him, but I will run into him. I will run into him because we are both actors, our world is tiny, and because life has a harsh, wise way of doing what she does. She will give us things as provocation to die quicker or to grow. I will read about him in the Times. I will see him in auditions. One time, I will sit across from him on the subway. How are you? I will ask, looking him in the eye. In response, he will move through every shade of pale and burn. He will shudder and shake. He will break eye contact while I will refuse to break eye contact. I will smile. I will wonder, have you become more than your past pieces? Over time, I will meet an uncanny number of men like him. With each person, I grow better at sensing the volatility beneath the sheen. I feel it like incoming rain. He holds the dormant capability to entertain. Tally the encounters, and I run out of fingers and toes. The idiom, everything happens for a reason, has never sat well with me. One cannot blurt, everything happens for a reason to a person who's just lost a loved one, been raped, or been diagnosed with cancer. The truth I prefer is, I assign my experiences their reasons. The reason behind this one evening wasn't to lose my faith in men, life, or my instincts. The reason for this one night, the purpose behind this one night was it proved my resilience. My beauty and youth will fade, people and money will come and go, but my ferocious passion to live is mine evermore. Startling, realizing this light something within me. For the first time in my life, I like myself. Life is masterful at being fearsome, but I have myself and I have you. Dear one, you are my loyal witness. You haven't disowned me. You have stayed, though life has grown painful. You have listened, as though I matter. For all that and more, I love you.
Thank you for listening to On the Block. Now call your mother. Be right back.
Welcome to the program, folks. This is your host, Andy Gurvich. I'm excited about our guest this week. Reema Zaman says this about her work. Quote, "Why else do we write or read but to invoke a loving voice in the dark, to alleviate our loneliness, to forge solidarity, to make sense of our inherent stunning madness," end quote. Reema was born in Bangladesh. She was raised in Hawaii and Thailand and moved to the United States to attend college. She has a BA in Women's Studies, a BA in Theater, and a minor in Religion. I can't wait to ask her about that. Mm-hmm. After graduation, she worked as an actress and a model in New York for 8 years. Now she writes narrative nonfiction, is a life coach, and writes for Dear Reema, where she responds to letters sent in by readers. Her first memoir, I Am Yours, is written as though she's speaking to her imaginary best friend from childhood, whom she never released. Some know their inner voice as God, a guardian angel, or a long-deceased ancestor. Reema knows this as a presence she met when she was 3 years old, a friend named Love. Love is her voice in the dark. I Am Yours is her story of stubborn perseverance through an unstable childhood, anorexia, disownment, rape, marriage, betrayal, divorce, the acting and modeling industry, racism, sexism, classism, and more, with the help of ever-loyal Love. It's a full plate. For Reema, life has not been simple, but it has been full. I Am Yours is an intimate, comprehensive study in identity, loyalty, integrity, and authenticity. Zaman explores her past and present, refracting selves, child, daughter, sister, wife, actress, Bangladeshi, immigrant, commodity, artist, woman. And Dear Reema, the main intention is to serve others. She ceases being the main character and focuses on the reader's journey. Reema's sources from her own life to explore similar topics as those found in I Am Yours are connective, collective trials, childhood wounds, addiction, ambition, body image, sex, dating, love, relationships, self-empowerment, ownership, spirituality, recovery, healing, humanity, humility, and purpose. For her, writing is service. Writing alchemizes our pain into poetry. Through it all, her mission is to be a conduit of love, a voice for those without one, to inspire and empower others to fill into their truest, boldest, brightest self. Reema believes that we are one story and that we are truly, and that all we truly need we hold within. Reema Zaman, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew.
So excited to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here.
Well, as our listeners heard in the beginning, we came out of the gate strongly with a story that you performed at Burnt Tongue recently here in Portland, and I wonder if we can just start there. I want to maybe back up after that and talk about your childhood and your parents and Bangladesh, but let's start with the maybe setting the stage for the piece that you read at Burnt Tongue here in Portland, Oregon recently.
Well, it's lifted from my book. It's the 23rd section. So the book goes year by year from infancy all the way to 31, and that is year 23. And in each year of my life, the book is made so I choose a pivotal turning point from each year of my life, or numerous ones from one year, depending if that year was particularly full. And so that's the 23rd year. That was a really big event that, like I said, the experience, although it was brutal and cruel and a violation, I'm a person that really believes that ultimately we each hold so much agency over, not over the things that happen to us, but we have agency over how we react to them. And that experience is particularly really confirmed for me my resilience. Because we have so much agency at any given point, we have the choice to assign our experiences a reason that can be empowering or disempowering. And I chose that one to be a moment of empowerment, which is how I look at life. And art is just a manifestation of that. It's like it helps you readdress your life and reconfirm it in a way that's empowering for yourself.
I should correct myself. I said the piece that you read at Burnt Tongue. For the listeners that weren't there, you performed this piece.
I did.
Quite shockingly and captivatingly, if that's a word, in front of I think a pretty stunned audience. And to welcome us, a lot of folks there hadn't met you and weren't familiar with your art, and so to sort of introduce yourself to the literary community by not only performing a piece like that, but one that's so vulnerable and so raw. Thank you for doing that, and my goodness, what a way to introduce yourself to Portland. I think folks that left that evening won't soon forget that experience.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I wanted to ask you about, before we, a question that I thought was really fascinating. Even within the piece, you talk about how you respond to it. There was that moment in it when you're on the subway and glaring at the individual, and that's such a powerful moment because it's such a raw thing to experience along with you, but then to see that moment of reclamation, it's not fully satisfying. It doesn't wrap up nice and tidy. But even within the piece, there's the you that isn't fully claimed by that experience, and I think that's really powerful for people to see.
Yeah, that I really believe only I own myself. He has no claim over me. No trial has any claim over me. And that moment in the subway, again, it's all of those harsh tests. There's plenty of tests each of us go through on a daily basis in the most innocuous settings, such as the subway.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to continually test and challenge and enhance and practice our muscle for resilience.
Yeah.
And that's what that moment, especially one of the many moments that means like that for me.
As somebody sitting in the audience and going through that, and as a man watching that, my mind immediately goes to two places. It goes to it goes to wishing it hadn't happened, right? But then the second place it goes to is wanting harm to come to this individual, to want to hurt this person or punish him somehow. And so that I think what was so amazing to me as somebody who wants to be an advocate is in one of those scenarios is not realistic because this thing has happened now, and in the other scenario, my attention goes to the perpetrator, and you know there's a place for punishing people and getting them off the street and holding them accountable, but my attention goes to here.
Right.
But that's leaving something pretty vital out, which is you and your voice. And so what's and I'm laughing because of the irony of it, that I think a lot of advocates can, whether or not we can punish somebody who's done something wrong, there's still a very real chance that the person who was victimized in this experience isn't going to be able to find their voice again. And
Right.
and we really need to pay attention to that, because even if whatever we do to this guy, right, if you have lost your agency, if you have lost your connection to that inner spark, then
Right.
that is a perpetual crime that is just there for the rest of your life.
And that's why the entire piece and all of my work, really, it's so much about the person who is living the story versus the person that the story is happening to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That it's you being the author of your narrative. And so you get to determine your voice. You get to determine what the things around you, what meaning they hold, so that your voice is never surrendered and it's never silenced, and you have so much say over how you want to walk through your life. And that's why that section, that entire piece, it has nothing to do with, we don't even talk about if he ever has retribution, like if he's ever been punished. It's like that is almost, of course, that's what happens in his life is important on a social level, on his personal level, but it's for me, it's much more important. The work I can do is giving each listener or reader, human being, the encouragement to know that your story is so vital. The way you survive this, the way you thrive using it and despite it, is very important to me.
You before we started recording, we were talking about maybe you bringing a program that you've worked on to the college where I teach, and we're going to definitely work on that. But I wonder if you can maybe tell our listeners a little bit about that, and because this performance that opened our program today is included in this program. So what is that, and why are you doing that?
So it's a talk. Well, it's a performance piece. It's a program. I'm trying to figure out the vocabulary for the things that I'm doing, because I know it's
great.
an amalgamation of different things.
That's
that
cool.
I'm
It's a
trying
good
to do.
space to be in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's called You Are the Voice. And the first 20 minutes is this performance piece you just heard. And then the next 20 minutes, it's about activism and empowerment. So it's 3 sections. Awareness. So here's the story. Activism is here's how you can take action. And empowerment is here's how you can empower yourself, whether that's as a community member, but then also in your own life, as a person who may know somebody who was sexually assaulted or was sexually assaulted yourself. And I'm specifically, again, going through, touching on the point that you made, which is I always end it on the self-authorship, self-leadership, self-agency. That is the note that we need to end on and need to stress, perhaps more than anything. And the entire thing is about resilience. The entire thing is about how resilience really is the muscle group that if we practice it and cultivate it, especially in our young girls who are privy to a unique volume and frequency of brutality,
Well
perhaps
said.
more than any other demographic. That's just the way life is. Life is lifelike and brutal to especially that demographic. And if we spend more time cultivating resilience in our girls and in our own selves, that is the ultimate strategy for self-defense that will allow you to walk through any fire. It's very important to learn physical self-defense tactics, but you may be overpowered physically to ever use them, or even if you did use them, the PTSD from something horrific like that will resonate what gets you through it is, again, if you can source from within, to be your own, whether it's your own leader who leads you through this fire.
You mentioned something a second ago about trying to find the words to talk about this work you're doing, because it's an amalgamation, and that leads into a question I had about your work in general, but about this project in particular, which is, again, before we started taping, you talked about something, and if I'm paraphrasing, so please relanguage this if you need to, but about wanting to trigger, to talk about a triggered empathy in people, and that's what the story portion, that's what the performance art piece is about. And you were saying how a lot of well-meaning activists, and you weren't in any way bashing people who've devoted themselves to activism, you were saying a lot of people who've given their whole hearts to doing this work will present the numbers. They'll write a piece or present something that says, look, 1 in 3 girls experiences this in the world. And you would think hearing that would be enough to tell everybody, oh my God, we have to act on this. But for some reason, hearing 1 in 3, which is probably even still underreported, experiences this doesn't, in many cases, trigger people's empathic awareness as much as being put into a kind of first person sort of, or third person witnessing of something happening. So if you can maybe speak to that a little bit and the importance of that. And I'm also, I guess the second part to that is, this is what I do. I ask 9 questions, but then you get to talk. I would love it. Totally great. The second part of that is, do you think your theater and religion background has something to do with this? Because the theater part for sure, but even as somebody who studied religion, this kind of ritualized experience is so important to raising people's situational and spiritual awareness. I think.
And galvanizing our spirits into action.
And a collectivism, for sure.
I would love to talk about all of that.
Please, you have the floor.
So let's start with the empathy part. Well, so what I was saying before we started recording was, all activists have incredible hearts and incredible passion. It's just, and the audiences we're speaking to, it's not that society is heartless. It's that the message is it's not being conveyed effectively enough to spark action. And so my lifelong fascination has always been, ever since I was a little child, I would always look at patterns and results. I love math and I love psychology and reading about what is it that really provides active triggers and how does that happen? How do I trace that connection? And then how do I, as an activist, create material that not just enlivens or inspires the spirit, but activates the human being into action, into following through in a massive way. So I believe story is probably the paramount way that really activates a heart. A seemingly cold, even the coldest audience can feel something for someone if they're speaking. And that's why all of my writing, all of my performance pieces are done in the first person and in the present tense, because it engages the listener or the reader or the viewer in this immediacy and this urgency, and it ignites authentic intimacy. I speak from inside the mouth of a memory. And you know how in writing there's the adage, show, don't tell. Maybe because I'm an actress, I take it one step forward. Feel, don't show or tell. What can I do to get you to feel the feelings I'm feeling? And that's why, hopefully while you were watching that or listening to this 20-minute piece, you can hear the tremor in my voice. You can feel the helplessness. You can feel the minute-to-minute minutia that goes into being raped, what it feels like, that the thoughts that are going through your head, the panic, heart, all of that, and ultimately the helplessness. And even, it's interesting, the performance and the audience is a metaphor in itself, because here's a girl going through something alone while a passive audience looks and listens on, which is where the majority of culture is. We know of all these statistics. Like you said, there are so many statistics. We've all memorized them. We've all read those articles and we've listened to those, broadcasts on the news, and we glaze over. Why is that? Our heart hasn't been activated. When do people really rise to action is usually when something in their personal life has happened. And then they start looking into cancer research because a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer. Then they start raising funds, or they start speaking out against sexual violence because it has happened to them or someone in their lives. When the love button is triggered, that's when we rise. Otherwise, we can feel sympathy for the statistic, but the statistic is not yet a person for us.
One of the things that's really interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, finish.
And that's why the story element is huge, because you cannot help but feel for that girl. By the end of the 20 minutes, you feel like you're friends. You feel genuine, sincere care, and she ceases to be a story. She ceases to be just a statistic that you can glaze over. Now she's a person You watch her grow up from this giggly, bubbly, like bushy-tailed, like bright-eyed girl in New York City who's so excited, and her voice is up here, and she's so excited for her date. And through the 20 minutes, you see the arc of her stepping into her womanhood, stepping into her strength. And you go on that journey with her, and you get to know her in this very intimate, powerful, and unforgettable way. And so that is the power of story. I'm not, saying all that to toot my own horn. I'm just saying that's the power of story, and that's how we activists truly engage people into action.
Yeah, story is one of our most ancient and most powerful technologies, and it is a community building and an empathy building machine. And one of the things that's really interesting about oxytocin, about the empathy drug, is that it's really triggered in person. A Facebook friend, if I have a Facebook friendship with somebody that I know in person, then when I'm interacting with them on Facebook, oxytocin will be triggered. But if I've never been in the same room with them, it won't, right? They've done studies on this already. And one of the things that I think is interesting about what you talked about triggered empathy, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. I have a director friend that told me this once. He said this was his theory on acting, and who, we'll see if you agree with this, right? But it spoke to this issue. He said that film actors were supposed to convey emotion in a way where they sort of were emptying themselves in the situation and allowing the viewer to kind of place themselves in it. So when you're watching a film, you're sort of, when you feel something, it's because you're putting yourself in the situation of the person experiencing the thing in the film. And that you're able to do that because the actor, as much as it might look like they're emoting, the actor is actually emptying themselves and allowing for you to step into. And that theater acting is the opposite. That in theater, the actor is feeling the thing. And for you to participate in that, you have to experience an empathy, not acting as if you are them, but feeling alongside of and behalf of them. So you're sort of holding space and grieving along with this person. But what the emotion you feel is one of empathy in a theater experience. And the theater actor has to then produce that emotion. And if they do it well, the audience will connect to it in this empathic embrace. But they have to be in each other's presence. You have to be in the room with them for that to work. And so I wonder what you think of that. And that's so important, because to have been in the room and with you and when you perform that piece was incredibly powerful. I think producer Celeste is shaking her head and rolling her eyes and throwing herself on the floor. But it was an incredibly powerful moment to be in the room. And I think much of that will be conveyed to people that hear the story on this podcast. But I think people that were there that hear this podcast will get this twinge of something in their gut that maybe others won't. And I think that's important. I think that talks about the story is a community building thing that we need to be in each other's presence. There's nothing that takes the place of authentic relationship building. Like you said before, someone cares about cancer research when it touches their family. When we realize that all human beings come from the same two people in the Rift Valley in Africa 175,000 years ago, we'll remember that every person is family. They all, by the way, went from there to southern India. And so if we don't trace our ancestry directly to the African continent, then everybody else on the planet is from southern India.
Wow.
And so if it's happening to anybody, it is happening to your family already.
Right.
It's something we've forgotten. Mahabharata tried to remind us of this as well. But can you speak to that a little bit about the importance of that in your work, of relationship building and the immediacy of presence, and of you're trying to connect people back to their own agency, but then when they get in one another's presence, another kind of thing happens.
Another kind of intimacy. This fire happens that is so much about, again, the eye contact or being in the same room, because it's, or just even physically watching it too, because I think that's why film works so well. Yeah. And our listeners can go and watch the video of the performance that we just listened to. I mean, there's something so uniquely powerful about live performance that I think we start breathing together and our hearts align, in the same way that, if two people who are falling in love, like their hearts align, or the mother and a child in her belly, like their hearts align. And theater and live performance does that. Like and that's why I've always loved art for this, that not only the transformative power that art is, that it allows us to transcend our false belief that you and I are so separate, that you and I are so different, that you and I are so foreign to each other. Not only does it allow us to transcend that, but it allows us to transform foreignness into intimacy or kinship. It allows us to transform distance into closeness. And it allows us like a transference of emotion. You get to feel my pain land almost physically. It feels viscerally. You feel it land onto your skin and kind of cook up this response that, again, as advocates, that's what we can use to get people up and following through. Yeah. It's a transference of energy almost. Not to sound too woo-woo, but I think we are a testament of that the woo-woo works. Yeah. When it happens, you feel it.
It's powerful because it brings people out of their homes, out in front of their screens and into each other's presence. And, the oldest, the storytelling technology I was talking about, one of the oldest ethics we have as a people is the hospitality ethic, which is to embrace the stranger, to embrace the other in your midst, not to fear the other. And so it's so tragic to watch as we move further and further from those ideals, where we have systems that teach us to fear other rather than to embrace other. And when the stranger comes in, you take them in and feed them and clothe them and give them a bath and let them sleep, and then all they owe you is a story. All they owe you in return is their story, because their story gives you some wisdom and some piece of our shared humanity that they can bring to the table that you probably haven't heard before, especially if they're from the further away they are, the better.
Right.
Because their story is going to contain even more human wisdom that you might not have ever come across.
That has never occurred to you before.
It's been completely turned around. Right. And I talk to people about this all the time, whether it's church, which is just a word which means community, which in the Greek was ecclesia, which is the community. Whether, Occupy, the Occupy promised itself and promised the world many things, and on all of those promises it failed. The one thing that it did well was it got people outside and in each other's presence and talking to one another. And someone's like, I care about reproductive rights. Well, I care about the environment. Well, I care about education. And people could look in each other's face, hear each other's stories, meet each other's children or parents or neighbors, and start talking. And so much about Euclidean architecture and layouts of cities, so much about the grid architecture and how our cities are meant for, and our especially suburbs are meant for people to sit in their houses, like in their jobs, in their cubicles, go to the store. We have big refrigerators, so you go to the store once, buy all this stuff, come back, throw it in your fridge, and then sit in front of your TV or computer, really isolated from one another. I mean, the internet gives me the ability to talk to anybody on the planet instantaneously, so much so that it's possible for me to talk to never actually be in the presence of another human. you know what I mean, on a regular
Right.
basis. And so it's really an ironic time where we have so much connectivity and so much isolation from one another at the same
Absolutely.
time. And your work makes me think about that, right? It makes me think about how we need to start bridging those gaps to one another, because people are on these little sort of islands
Exactly.
crying out. And
we've seen the results of that.
Yeah.
I mean, we are now in this time of huge accessibility to each other's private lives.
Yeah.
But how much connection do we really have
Right.
with each other? And that's, I think, that's the paradox. That's the seemingly strange, that's the strange dichotomy we have, that we are so accessible. All of your information is online for me to look up, right?
Right.
But how little will I still know of you? Like, how much will I really know of you? And and it's something I think about so often, especially as a writer who's also an actress, and that's why I'm so excited about being in this moment where now I am taking the work out to the public and sharing it with our community, our immediate community, and then hitting the road with it. That's
Yeah.
what I want to do, is because otherwise I'm just speaking into a vacuum. And we all know, whether it's as practitioners, as artists or writers or advocates and activists, you can't self-actualize in a vacuum. And then as human beings, we cannot self-actualize in a vacuum. And we know about this, and yet there is so much chosen disconnection, and I mean, I 2 days a week, 2 afternoons a week, a few months ago, I started realizing, okay, I'm just at my desk, and my job as a writer is to authentically serve and reflect culture, but I'm barely seeing anyone unless they're my parents down the street.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, I need to get out there and know my community. And I have been cashiering at Whole Foods twice a week.
Wow.
Because it's one of those jobs where I am just I just hold space for people. And I meet about 300 people every shift.
Wow.
Every 6-hour shift, I meet about 300 people, and they all tell me their stories.
You get to have these little 3 to 5 minute interactions with them. Yeah.
Because every person I ask, what's been a highlight of your day?
Oh, wow.
And because in my personal life, I'll ask people what's something exciting or grateful in your life right now, like that you're grateful about.
Yeah.
And then you really get to know someone instead of asking, well, what do you do? Right?
Right, yeah.
So as a cashier, I ask people, like, what's been a highlight? And
Which
they'll
is really
tell
a
me,
class question.
Yeah, I
What do you
guess so.
do?
You're
It
right.
really is, yeah. It's a weird thing. It puts people under a lot of pressure. Yeah.
And there's something
To
about
come up with something that sounds acceptable. And
exactly,
money-making.
yeah, and impressive
Yeah.
versus connective.
Yeah.
There's such a huge
Yeah.
difference between what's impressive and what's connective. I don't care what's going to impress me. I want to know, how are we supposed to connect, and how can I serve you? And so I started I did that job, and so that's in my present life. But I remember when I was 21, this urgent need for human-to-human connection was, I'd grown up knowing, I'd been around so many examples and evidence of how without connection and without contact, the human spirit and the human body and the human brain will atrophy. But at 21, I really came into an example that was probably the most exaggerated and painful example. I was working at an orphanage in Thailand. So this was while I was in college, right? And I would go back for the summers in Thailand, and I was working at, it's called the Klong Toi, it's called Ban Phung Pha.
Okay.
And it's an orphanage for children with handicaps. Like in Thailand, we still call it that. It's like, that like mental or physical disabilities. Yeah. And I was assigned to the infant and toddler wing. And so most of the kids, they had cerebral palsy. And my favorite little angel, his name, I called him Little Star. And he had the softest skin in the world because he hadn't had very much friction with human life yet. In every single way you can take that sentence. And he was so happy all day long. And most of the kids in the orphanage were incredibly happy and self-reliant because
two things you wouldn't describe most Americans.
No, or most toddlers, right? Oh, yeah, exactly. Most Americans. And, well, it's because they had already lived, even at the age of 1, 2, 3, or 4, they had already had enough experiences to confirm for them that just because you cry, somebody isn't going to show up. Because even though all of the nurses and the aides and us volunteers, and I was a volunteer there, a physical therapist there, no matter how much love we had, there was simply not enough hands on deck. And so their muscle for call and response had atrophied. Because they knew that just because I call, somebody isn't going to respond. And the orphanage was always so quiet. And the usual sounds of toddlers that we know, like, tantrums and then squeals of glee and their imaginations bouncing off the walls. All of the sounds of childhood that we take for granted had just been dimmed.
Wow.
And Little Star, I called him Little Star because of a few things. He was always happy. He had this big smile because he was a star. And because he had been born with all 4 limbs fused in place. His elbows and his shoulder blades, his shoulders, his elbows, and his knees, they were all at right angles, if you can imagine that. And so he was this star, and he had figured out a way to shimmy across the floor, on the cold cement floors, using his ab muscles. And he had this like tiny, really well-defined six-pack, which was the most beautiful.
So now I'm angry with the kids. I'm joking. Like before, I was in that with sympathy, but now I'm kind of
you're like, but it's like it was the most like heartbreaking.
Just gotta rub it in.
Yeah, the most heartbreaking thing ever. You know, and he would just shimmy across the floor in this like fish-like way. So he looked like a starfish.
Oh my goodness.
And so I called him Little Star, and all day long he would just chatter away to himself and keep himself company, because even more than the other kids who were also used to not getting that much hands-on attention and interaction and language and touch and being held, he got those things in the least, because truth of the matter is most people found him uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, most of the volunteers stayed clear of him because he made them cry, you know, without meaning to. I mean, all children are unique, and he was stunningly so. And that's why his skin was also the softest in the entire infant ward, because he had been touched the least amount. He had been held the least amount in his entire 4-year-old life. And here was the most delicate and tender and painful example of what happens when a human being is just not given enough interaction to develop. And we know the statistics of what happens to children in orphanages when they don't develop, you know, mentally, emotionally, socially, intellectually, because they don't have the enough human contact resources. They don't have language. How do you and I even gain a personality? How do we cultivate personalities through call and response? You say something that makes me laugh, so all of a sudden now I know what humor is.
Right.
You give me a hug, or you say something that makes me feel tender, and then I know what self-esteem is. You know, then I feel inspired. Like that's how, like, a thought is created by one electron sending a spark over to another electron, and this pathway, this bridge, is what we call a thought. He literally did not have as many opportunities as you and I have been so fortunate to have, to create those thoughts, to synthesize those thoughts. So I don't know if he was happy. I know he was cheerful. I know he was chipper, but was he curious? You know, he never had a temper tantrum. He had nothing to get, he had no thing to have friction against, you know, emotionally and physically. And also he only knew 4 words. He knew 4 phrases. He knew ahan, which means food, nam, which means water, sawadikap, which means hello, and so kapkun kap, which means thank you. His entire life had whittled down to those 4 phrases.
Wow.
Because of lack of interaction. And so, yes, so that's my long-winded response to, where we are as a human race in this age of disconnection. We will each atrophy in different ways if we do not connect enough, if we do not touch each other's hearts, each other's minds, and if we do not go out into the world and serve each other and interact in a kind and humane way. We need each other to thrive.
You made me think of a couple of things there, and I want to ask you a couple more questions, and we'll go to break. There's that famous World War II study they did on the children in England that were sent up out of London during the bombings, during the German bombings, and these babies started dying, and they couldn't figure out why, because nothing was wrong with them, but they were dying for lack of human contact. That's the only thing that was wrong with them, and they realized that the babies just stopped living for lack of connection.
Yeah,
right? And that's a profound thing to think about. You made me, when you were talking about being the cashier and asking people about something, the high point of their day. It reminded me of a story. I had a friend visit from Europe, our friend Karen, and she immediately commented on how Americans, when you go to the store or something, they say, "Oh, how are you today?" And then you go, "Fine, how are you today?" And she goes, "Do they care how you're doing?" And I said, no, nobody. You're not supposed to. You're just supposed to say fine,
right?
And then you say, "How are you?" back, and then they say fine. And my friend said, "What's the point of that?" And I said, "I don't really know. Is this something you're supposed to do? For God's sake, don't actually ever tell anybody how you're doing."
Feeling.
Right.
I know.
Because that breaks all sorts of weird boundaries in the United States, right? And so, sure enough, so now I've educated her on how to be a good American, and so we're driving to Seattle, and we stop at this gas station, and at this AM PM, and she goes in, and we're buying our Cheetos or whatever and our gas, and she says to the lady, "How are you today?" She's trying to, try her American thing. And the lady, "Oh, my son is in jail, and my husband's, on chemotherapy." The lady just opens up to her and starts telling her story.
Yeah.
And my friend was utterly not prepared for this and neither was I, by the way, because that's something that you're not supposed to do. So I can imagine that people coming through a line are expecting that same thing, are expecting you to give them that sort of, "How are you today? Fine. How are you today? Fine." And then you ring the things up and you make some small talk about the snow outside or something, right? But a question that, tell me the high point of your day so far or something. Do you get people that are kind of thrown off for a minute and don't know how to take that? Because that's a more authentic question from a stranger than they might have ever had in their life as an American citizen. And I really mean that. We're encultured to not at all notice one another's suffering or one another's successes. We're supposed to sort of have this smiley, cordial distance with one another as we walk along in silence and isolated from one another. And in a way, we're the opposite of this wonderful child you told us about, because we are inundated with words and interactions and images and thousands of little things that trigger all of this neural pathways, but they're all very superficial and they all go by very fast. The ability to stop and go horizontal in real human connection is something that is reserved for very few people in our lives in America, where we're told to not trust one another in most social settings.
Absolutely.
And so, do people look at you like you're nuts when you ask that sometimes?
Yeah, there's something, my family always remarks on this, and as do friends who know me really well, that they said, for some reason, you always get people to tell you their entire life story.
Wow.
And the story of their heart.
I bet the person behind them in line is loving that.
Everyone, and we've had some of the most incredible, every day that I have those shifts are just incredible. People will pour out their heart. And because I think we are each craving and really seeking, even if we're conscious about it or not, we're looking for an opportunity to give our story to someone else, to share our story, and
Well
especially
said.
to someone who wants to listen.
Right?
I mean, what a
gift.
yeah. And so I feel so privileged to have turned out to be this unusual creature that people hand their stories to. For some reason, people trust me.
Is that what Dear Reema is too?
Yeah, it is, because
people
I started
looking for connection and looking for someone just to validate and hear their story.
all throughout my childhood and teens, and then now into my 20s and 30s, where I've been the recipient of a large and unusual volume of people's innermost thoughts and their trials, the things that they are going through. And that's why, anything I do, I'm just trying to do that service. Like, how do I best serve you if you're giving me your vulnerability? How do I take care of it to the best of my ability? What can I cook up to not just listen, but to serve? Like, how can I empower you? What can I give you that will make you feel empowered in this situation?
Yeah.
In your pain. And so about the cashier thing, Lord, everyone, you can see the relief on people's faces when they finally do get to talk about their day. Because especially for single people, or for young moms, or for older moms, I'm the first person who has asked them.
And actually meant it.
And actually meant it.
Yeah.
And for a lot of men, women, children, everyone.
Yeah.
Because a lot of men too, how often do they really open up and tell somebody what's been going on? And there's something about wearing an apron and standing behind a counter that I become this very safe person for them to pour their entire story to. Whether it's also in my tone and the personality I have, you can tell I'm not going to judge you. You can tell I just am asking for an opportunity to love on you a bit. But then there's also the anonymity.
Yeah.
They'll never have to see me again. Although now, everyone makes sure.
A regular,
people we have a line. My line is always.
Yeah, the guy next to is hey, I'm open. We're good. Yeah,
it's true, and we're laughing, but and I have this memory where I memorize everyone's names and their children's names and their dog's name and their parents' names. So I remember okay, so how is your mom doing? I know she went into hospice. What's the latest? What's going on? Tell me if I can help. So I always remember. And again, it's because I care. It's because I really feel I was born to do this, which is to help figure out as many ways I can love people,
Celeste was a cashier at Zupan's here in the area, which is another store like Whole Foods with and absolutely, the people consider you a part of their families. You watch their kids grow up. You watch all of their good and bad choices, and see them go through several relationships. Yeah. And I think in those stores, Zupan's and Whole Foods especially, the food costs so much. I think they feel entitled to a therapy session or something when they're in line, right? To go along with the $300 bill for the grocery.
And you brought up Dear Reema. Yeah, I started that because I just wanted to formalize this.
Yeah.
The trend that has happened throughout my life, that has been my education. It's when somebody asks you for your insight that you really dig in and you're like, okay, how can I cook up something worthwhile to give them. And so Dear Reema came out of it. It's a natural evolution of what it is I am and what it is I do, and it's the formalized version of it, where people write in about their deepest, darkest pains in their moment of deepest, darkest pain. Wow. Usually, one of the letters is a woman who had been sexually assaulted 9 years ago and just had never been able to heal it. And so, it's not a casual response that I hit send on, Each one it's like a chapter in a book. Yeah. And
how long have you been doing that?
I've been doing that for this year now. Okay. So a little less than years. I started in the spring because, so the book we've been referencing, I Am Yours, that one right now, my agent Lisa is circulating it through publishing houses for us to find our ideal publisher. And so once the manuscript left my hands, while we were going through the final revision on the final draft, I started doing Dear Reema. So that was in, like March.
That's cool.
And because
it'll
I'm
be established
constantly...
and it'll be supporting the book when the book comes out.
But also it's... Yeah, that is absolutely one
All
of
of
the
your
things.
work kind of interconnects.
But it's like,
yeah.
I'm never not going to be cooking up something.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find different ways to make people feel loved and
just
empowered.
more facets of using your gifting and your story
Thank
to
you.
help others. I
Yeah.
see it all as complimentary.
Yeah.
Not really in a branding way, just in the
No.
authenticity of the work you're doing.
And I honestly, like, I
Adding
live
layers.
and breathe this. I
Yeah.
wake up, so excited by the latest, like, scheme. Like, right now, taking this to colleges. How do I just figure out different models of this one larger message, which is we are each the authors of our lives, and all we need, we hold within. Like, how do I really help that messenger that message? How can I be an effective ambassador for that message? How can I be the most humblest and effective and intelligent and resourceful ambassador for that message? That's all I'm ever obsessed. I'm obsessed with that. It's like, how do I best do this?
You just quickly before we go to break, this piece that our listeners heard at the beginning of the show, that's chapter 23 of your book.
Yes.
You performed that for the first time.
That was the first
At
time
Burnt
that
Tongue.
you saw. And like you said, like, it was, it's not something to be read. It's, I memorized it and I had rehearsed it for weeks going up. And what was interesting was so many of the other pieces that were performed that night, that were read that night were, about the post-election, the election results, and were specifically written for that, or it was speaking to that. But strangely enough, my piece, although I had chosen it months ago when Dami asked me to perform, it was so timely and timeless. It was so relevant. Hearing the pain and desperation and helplessness of a young brown immigrant girl who felt that here was something that happened to her and she had no social agency. She had no representation in society that was going to speak up for her. And I have been so grateful for those experiences in my life, because every time I have felt that nobody's going to be holding the torch for me, that's only, again, just told me, like, I just got to keep on doing that for myself. And that has informed who I am. And it has worked to my benefit because I've chosen for it to work in my benefit, to help me get stronger. But the piece was very timely because, again, it was it's timely and timeless. These are the voices that need to be heard. These are the stories that we, maybe now as a culture, because of the political climate, the necessity has become all the more pronounced.
Yeah.
People have grown intolerant of pretending to ignore or ignoring voices of the marginalized. And those of us who are marginalized, we have grown absolutely intolerant. Like, there's no more, we're not going to mince words anymore, and we are all the more galvanized to speak directly and loudly and decisively. And
our recent guest Caleb Stevens spoke in this very same voice. Yeah,
I loved that episode.
He is something else.
He's something else. And
I wonder if you could speak to one question, and then we're going to go to break, and I want to ask you something to lead us into break. But what made you, Dami Shoemaker, the author, the activist, the curator of Burnt Tongue, and all around troublemaker here in Portland, former OTB guest and co-conspirator in Lydia's corporeal writing tornado as well. Dami is the one who introduced us, and so we have Dami to thank for you being on the show. And then you brought that piece to Burnt Tongue, and so I want to give a shout out to Dami and maybe see if you want to say anything to Dami. But also, what made you, think, that you were going to come share that piece and be that vulnerable with Burnt Tongue? What was it about Dami or Burnt Tongue that made you think these folks are worthy of this level of intimacy and sharing from you.
Oh, thank you for phrasing it in that way. But it's actually, I never would phrase it that way in my own head. And I think that's maybe the answer to your question, which is,
we felt very honored that you brought that piece to us. Yeah. Especially someone who hadn't, we don't have a long history of intimacy and relationship with you, so it was a very vulnerable thing for you to just throw that out there and trust that we were going to follow you.
Yeah.
Where we needed to follow you.
I think because I am so committed to the message, to girls and women and men too, to human beings, that you are the authority you need at the end of the day. You are the leader that you need to hear at the end of the day. You're the only voice that can, yours is the voice that will lead you to the light. Like, I'm so committed to helping spread that message that I never feel vulnerable. I never feel hesitant to take it into any setting, to bring it to anyone. And people have asked me, does it feel nerve-wracking to share this kind of material that is so intimate? Not in the least, because it hasn't. Yes, it has everything to do with me, but it also has nothing to do with me. I'm so committed to the work, but more than the work, I'm so committed to the person that person in the audience who needs to hear that message. I'm committed to them. And so my nerves or anxiety or insecurity have no space on that stage. And I'm never nervous when I do performances that these kind, I'm never ever, because, and I tell myself this before I walk into a room or walk onto stage, like that night, I said, I'm not here to play small. I'm not here to play big. I'm here to be a messenger and a leader. That's all. And it can sound arrogant, but it's coming from this deep place of service. And that's why I never feel vulnerable. It has very little to do with me.
We're going to go to break now, but I wonder if you can set up, during the break, the audience is going to hear the audio from this crazy video you did called I Made a Sex Tape. And the song itself and the audio will speak for itself, and people should definitely come to your site and to YouTube to check out the video to get the full message. But I wonder if you can give the context a little bit and set up what this piece of art was and why you did it. I listened to it in amusement and then in increasing horror as the song progresses and the lyrics become clear. There's a talk of midgets, there's lots of stuff going on. But I wonder if you can set the song up and what it was and why you made it, because it's a brilliant piece of art. But it's a great piece of satire as well. And as funny as it is and shocking as it has a very serious message. What I felt when I was watching it is that every pop star I've ever seen singing, this is what they're actually wanting to sing. Right. But they're instead you're getting this other thing on the surface. And just, if I may quickly, and then set it up, and we'll go to break after that. When I see things like the recent thing with Kanye or something, or Lady Gaga talking about PTSD, I know a lot of people go, oh, wow, poor rich person. And it's really easy to make fun of, Kanye. And Kanye does a lot of stupid things. And when he has a meltdown, it's very, very low-hanging fruit to kind of point at that and laugh for all of us, myself included. But something that's not funny is the pressures of that industry and how it eats people alive. And if you were somebody with a strong family and a strong sense of self going into that industry, into that entertainment industry, you damn sure probably aren't going to keep that sense of self for very long. And so what you might be seeing in a guy like Kanye is somebody that was like that already, or you might be seeing as somebody that was turned into that by a pretty predatory industry. And so I see that in that song as well. And
Thank you so much.
Wonder if you can, now that I've asked you what your song's about and then talked for 10 minutes about what I think it's about.
Well, that's the beauty of art, right? Like, that's why I share it. Because I want to hear. And that was such a profound take on it. Thank you. And it's one of the things I wanted to absolutely trigger in people, to realize that how easy it is to be eaten up and shaped by these industries.
Yeah.
And one thing we probably should spend some time talking about is, my time as an actress in the traditional setting and as a model, and that day to day I saw the people around me, and I felt within me how damaging those industries are, and voracious, and that it will eat you up and mangle you up, and there's so much messaging and encouragement to become these gaudy caricatures versus human beings. Like, authenticity is not at all encouraged. And so the entire video, it traces the escalation of a media darling, someone who, like, their rise into fame, and how that parallels the descent of self. And it's about celebrity idolatry and voyeurism and greed and shame in our culture, where everything becomes pageantry. It really does.
Yeah.
And it's and I would have all of these thoughts while I was sitting in one audition room after another for a modeling audition or for an acting audition, and we can leave this for after the break, but like the reasons why I did take a leave of absence, an indefinite leave of absence from traditional acting, was because the opportunities that I was called into audition for, by and large, there were things that were not intelligent, for roles that were actually just the very stereotypes that I had wanted as a young actress to play against. That's why I became an artist, is to challenge and take apart stereotypes, perpetuated by patriarchy. Yet here I became an avid participant and messenger of those stereotypes. I was hired to do that.
It's not by accident.
No, and so I would have all of these thoughts, and I wrote up this song while sitting in an audition one day, and thinking like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to do work that is original and bold and radical and intelligent. Maybe my ticket is just to do it myself. Like, what a novel concept.
Right.
Like, and it's a metaphor for any of us. Like, if the roles available and offered to you are not the roles that are fulfilling you, write your own.
Yeah.
Whether that's in your
powerful.
family structure, your marriage, your relationship, or society, write your own. If the one that is being offered to you is not meaty enough.
We're going to go to break on that note, and people will hear the song during the break, and we'll come back. And we did things a little out of order here, but that's because I wanted to start with that powerful story that you read at Burnt Tongue. So when we come back, I do want to ask you about growing up in Bangladesh, about your parents and their influence on your life, and then your time in school and as an actress and model, and the other work that you're doing now in the book, and where we're going from here. Does that sound good?
That sounds awesome.
You are listening to On the Block Radio, folks. Our guest is Reema Zaman, and we will be right back after these words.
Thank you for listening to On the Block. We talk to smart people so you don't have to. We'll be back in a moment.
Now I am so famous, I got no shame. And that's when my game is mad. America loves me, I'm your guilty pleasure. My life is your drug, I am my national treasure. And America loves me, America loves me, America loves me. I'm your guilty pleasure. Just chilling one day, not knowing what to do. Then I said to myself,
don't need any talents, special skills, or brains. All you need is a camera, some haters and chains. Harrison, can you are my inspiration? You could have a career without an education. My parents kept on saying, move your life along, so all I had to do was take a big old dong. I made a sex tape and now I'm so famous, I got no shame. And that's what my game is, and America loves me, I'm your guilty pleasure. My life is your drug, I am a national treasure. Come and give me some. And America loves me, and America loves me, and America loves me. I'm your guilty pleasure. My honey for your money in exchange of power. I'm a corporation, I get paid by the hour. My gift to the world for heuristic invasion. I'm a role model, voice of a generation, but I want more. Keep screaming my name, gotta do something big, gotta up my game. Think baby, think want a reality show. I got it, no it's not a turn fake, let's go. I sexed a lady, now I'm even more famous. I got no skills, except I get break honey lingus. And America loves me, I'm your guilty pleasure. My life is your drug, I am a national treasure. Give me some. And America loves me, and America loves me, and America loves me. I'm your guilty pleasure. Think feel all good, relax, take a breather. Do a shot of tequila with a veggie chaser. Endorsements are back, launch my own perfume. It's called Essence of Puss, it makes a room boom boom. Then all of a sudden my world's upside down. My agent calls me with the news, he ain't messing around. A new tape on the web, a new bitch on the block. She ain't nothing really special, sex a real me. I know I'm in trouble, ratings down to single digits. Gotta do something huge, gotta fuck me a midget. I fucked a midget, now I'm even more famous. Still got no skills, so he put it into my anus. And America loves me, I'm your guilty pleasure. My life is your drug, I am a national treasure. I made a sex tape and now I'm so famous, I got no shame. And that's what my game is. And America loves me, I'm your guilty pleasure. My life is your drug, I am a national treasure.
Hi, this is Max Dashu with the Suppressed Histories Archives, and you're listening to On the Block Radio.
Okay, welcome back to the program, folks. Your host, Andy Gurvich here. We're speaking with Reema Zaman. And before we went to break, I brought up Dami Shoemaker and the Burnt Tongue series, and we were talking about the piece from your book that you read, and I asked you about Dami and Dami's influence in your life and how you met. So I wonder if we can maybe start there.
Right.
And we can revisit that, and then I want to back up and go into your childhood and growing up in Bangladesh and your parents and stuff. So tell us about Dami and how you met.
Yeah, I just love Dami. I'm so grateful to her for so much.
Hi, Dami.
She's incredible. She's a force of love and strength. And I met
snark.
her and snark. I met her. Well, so I moved out to Oregon, to Portland 3 years ago, and the first year was devoted purely to writing this book that we've been, I Am Yours. And then I started reaching out into the community, seeing, how can I get connected? How can I find people like myself and friends and other writers and artists? And I started just going to different readings at Powell's. Yeah. And the first reading I went to was Lydia Yuknovich's one for the small backs of children. Exactly. And I recognize your faces from there, actually, because, and so this was, I believe this was 2 summers ago. So it wasn't last It wasn't this past summer. It was the summer before, wasn't it? Or the summer before that. No, there was
last summer. Yeah.
Last summer, yeah. Sorry. So not this one, the one before. So 2014, and I was in this room full of, I think there was about 100 of us, right?
Yeah.
And everyone knew each other, and it was so beautiful. This tribe of love and community, and
she's a bit of a thing.
Oh my gosh!
Here.
And but not just, it didn't just feel like a famous author speaking to her followers. Not in the least. Everyone there knew and loved each other in a very different way that I, coming from New York, had experienced.
And appreciates and supports the art each other's making too, not
absolutely.
just...
And the conversation, the kind of conversation she held with you all was so much more intimate and filled with personal jokes that everyone was in on. 100 people were in on. And I just remember being like, who are these people? I want to be a part of them. I love them already. And I had always dreamt of love on that kind of pitch and intensity, especially among artists, and support, because the community I came from or watched happen around me in New York was very bloodthirsty, you know, and so I remember going there and being like, what's going on? I want to get, I just want to learn more about everyone here. And Dami and I befriended each other on Facebook. And then, but we still hadn't met face to face until just a few months ago.
Wow.
Because also, when I was standing in that room, this was prior to signing with my agent. I was still looking for an agent then. And I remember just kind of having a flash where one day I will be in a room like this, and it'll be with my book, and I too will have a huge group of loving friends. And like, this is exactly how, it's rare that we see such a tangible version of the vision we too are aspiring towards. So I've really held on to that memory and that feeling of all of you guys in that room. And that kept me alive for a long time.
Wow.
And that was so I saw that reading took place at the same time when I was still trying to get my book out there and trying to get an agent. And the Lisa whom I'm with, she was the only person I really wanted. She was my number one choice, and she was the only person I sent this draft of my book to, and she offered representation like a few months after being in that room at Powell's with you guys.
Amazing.
And then so flash forward a year later, Lydia has another reading at Powell's, and this time I made sure to stay to talk to Dami and Lydia, because they had just given me so much nourishment without knowing they had for so long. They, it's a very lonely thing to write, let alone then try to get your work out there.
Right.
Because I had no industry contacts whatsoever. I had no experience in this. I came out here and I wrote for the first time. I hadn't grown up with a dream to be a published author. Like that, a lot of people have that dream from when they're 7 years old, but no, my dream was to be an actress.
Right.
And so it was moments like meeting Dami's tribe, seeing that, those are the moments that kept me going in these last couple of years.
Wow.
And so I went up so Lydia had another reading with this spring, right? I think it was spring. And I made a point to go up to, and prior to that, I had also sent Lydia a drawing of a feather.
Of some of your art.
Yeah.
Which you were just showing us at the break, which is stunning, by the way.
Thank you. And I had sent it through Andy, her husband, at a Dear Sugar podcast with Cheryl Strait, who is another faraway mentor of mine, who's kept me alive for years without knowing she has.
Please don't mention other podcasts on this podcast. I'm very sensitive.
Sorry.
Okay. Absolutely kidding.
I know.
No, they're great. Cheryl's great.
But yeah,
even though she won't come on, we'll get her.
And
Brian's great too.
And so anytime that someone has given me nourishment, and so many authors have over the years, especially other women, I'll find a way to send them a token of my heart.
Oh, that's very cool.
And so through Andy, I sent both Cheryl and Lydia these little drawings with, heartfelt letters on the back saying,
Wow.
like, you have kept me alive. You have no idea who I am, but thank you.
Wow, powerful.
And so months later, when I was at this reading this past spring, I made sure to stay to talk to Lydia and to Damian just to say thank you in person after years of knowing them from afar. And Lydia recognized me and she goes, oh my gosh, the feather, like you are Reema, because Reema is an original name.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, and Dami and I instantly we hugged. The first time ever meeting, we just hugged, and she still says it was when our eyes, like when we made eye contact, it was as if my inner child skipped and her inner child skipped. Like we were just like, oh, hi. Like, oh, I know you.
Yeah.
Like it felt immediately like,
That's great.
And and we made plans to get together and do something soon. And then within a few days, she was, diagnosed.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, let's drop any talk of anything else, because she was like, oh, I really want to introduce you to people, and I said, no, now is about how can we serve you, what do you need, what's your address, let me just show up.
Wow.
And then for the last couple of months, like we just hang out, and it's all been about like, let's take care of Dami, right?
Healing and
Because
restoration.
she has kept so many people alive over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, an entire communities of people. And what has been incredible is, rightfully so, everyone has now come to do that for her on this whole new level. And so I just love her so much. And then I got to know Lydia more I took one of her workshops in November, which revolutionized my mind. She always has from far away.
How?
But to have her,
How and why? How did it do so?
well, it was called Exhausting Metaphor, and I love me some metaphor, as you can tell. And then it was also my first time ever being in a room with other writers. I have a lot of actor friends, and a lot of director friends and filmmaker friends, but I have one friend who is also a writer, but he's a very different kind of writer. He writes prescriptive nonfiction for business books and things like that. And he was the one who connected me to, we have the same agent.
Okay.
And so his name's Srini, and he has he also has an incredible podcast called The Unmistakable
Mark
Creative.
this down. We'll cut this out. Again, the name of the show? Oh, no.
Yeah, so The Unmistakable Creative.
Okay, cool. And he addresses the stuff that he's...
Yes, about extraordinary people doing unmistakable things. There are unmistakable people doing extraordinary things.
I think we are just on the cutting edge of the golden age of podcasting.
Yep,
I'm so excited about it, I can't even say it.
Yep.
That we are just figuring out the technology. We're just figuring out how to make interesting kinds of art with this. And so many people who wouldn't get a broadcast license or wouldn't, get a primetime drive slot on syndicated, terrestrial radio now have this outlet, and my goodness, if people and people are listening, 50% of the public right now, but that number is going to triple in the next couple of years.
Incredible.
And voices like this, and people by word of mouth, suddenly people have thousands and thousands of listeners that listen to the show, and they can keep their overhead low and get really fantastic information out there. So that's cool.
Right, and I just think podcasters, you guys are such generous folk. You're doing this to showcase and shine light on other people versus so many of us, we're our own ambassador, and it's such a humble and generous thing you are doing.
Well, like Celeste says, when we go to karaoke, not everybody can sing. You need some people just to sit and listen, and clap and cheer.
The kind of podcasts I love are like yours, which is your personality is just as much a component in this as
Don't
the
tell
people
me that, I'll freeze up.
No, it's beautiful, and it's dialogue versus monologue is so much more engaging.
I have a question for you, speaking of dialogue. So let's back up now that we're an hour and a half into the show. So you're from Bangladesh, and you spent your childhood back and forth between Bangladesh and Thailand. Why, and what was that like for you?
Why was,
why did you bounce between the two?
Back. Okay, so I was born there. And in Bangladesh. And then when I was 2 years old, we moved to Hawaii.
Okay.
And my father was doing his doctorate there in economics. And my brother was born in Hawaii. And then when I was 5.5, we moved to Bangladesh for about 6 months, 7 months. My mom finished up her master's in English literature, while my father went to Thailand because he got a posting with the United Nations, which is where he still lives now.
Really?
Yeah. And so when I was 6.5, we moved to Thailand full time, and we were all together, the four of us, myself, my brother, and my parents. And we grew up there until, and I graduated high school from Thailand and moved out to New York City, or New York, upstate New York. I went to Skidmore, and then down to the city when I graduated half a year early. And moved out to New York. No, it was more when, if you're doing enough degrees, you just add up the credits.
The credits. Yeah. Now, so both your parents are Bangladeshi.
They are, and we're full-blooded Bangladeshi. And my, I was.
Was Thailand a culture shock for you, or is it things similar?
I mean, it was. I think when you're that young, even to. Nothing really felt like a shock, I feel, and because also Hawaii was different from Bangladesh. And what has been, maybe this is the better way to answer, which is I've always been a foreigner in any environment. In Bangladesh, I'm a foreigner because we're culturally not Bengali.
Right.
And then also even physically, we don't look like what traditionally is Bengali features physically. Yeah. And so everywhere I have been, people have reminded me of my alleged difference. So that's the way I've grown up. Of always being told that you are different, which has actually been, instead of feeling alienated, it's actually been very positively informing. It kind of gave me free rein to then author my own personality.
That's interesting.
And lean into it. Lean in. If I am so different as you are always telling me that I am, I'm going to go full out with that.
It's interesting. We had Frank Miles on the show a while back, and he was talking about being black and on like Tinder, and he says it's tough because you get people that either fetishize the difference or ostracize it. So he went on one date. He went on one date, and the guy goes, "Oh, sorry, I'm just not into black guys." And he goes, "Wait a minute, what does that mean?"
Exactly.
Right? And then he goes, no, don't worry, I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine because he's totally really into black guys. And he goes, well, what does that mean?
Well, it means because all black guys are the same.
Right. And so there's an identity crushing aspect to that. And so I wonder if you can maybe talk to, as you've grown and going into modeling and in acting, right? I think you experience both, right? You experience the sort of typecasting sort of limitations that come along with that, and then there's also the fetishizing of it as well, and both things are dehumanizing. Very much so, very
dehumanizing. But I just want to speak a little bit more about how you asked about the impact of growing up in those cultures in Thailand and Bangladesh. The biggest impact was I was always cognizant from a very young age, which maybe other people are not privy to this kind of information or saturation of information in the way we were, which is women have such little agency in this world. I had constant reminders of this.
No matter where you were, that was a constant.
That was a constant.
Bangladesh, Thailand, Hawaii, New York.
Well, and especially as a young girl in Bangladesh and in Thailand, everywhere I turned, I was being personally reminded of this. I would see it socially. I would see it in my family structure. Wow. And so it all informed my belief that I grew up with that women are given such little voice in this world. I have to do something about it. I mean, there's this one, it's such a gift growing up in so many different cultures because you're exposed to a worldview that were you to be raised in a bubble, you're not exposed to. The
Right.
only way you start asking questions is if there's something triggered it, you know?
Right.
If something in your environment triggered the question. Otherwise, you just live in Pleasantville.
Right.
And so I was constantly asking all these questions, and questions that, you know, from a young age, at 6 years old, where does poverty come from? How does that happen? What is it? Why are some people mean to other people because of their skin color? I mean, things like that. I was always asking my mom and father about those things, and they're both humanitarians. My mother is a teacher and my father is a diplomat with the United Nations, and now he's retired, but he does consultancy work too, and they are tried and true humanitarians and activists.
Sounds like education is also very important to both of
Huge.
them,
Well,
so-
especially I think any of us who are a quote unquote minority culture,
Yeah.
we are raised with the belief that education is your ticket to freedom. And this world is very, very cruel. And your only way to succeed and survive with your spirit intact is for you to do it on your own terms, for you to learn the tools you need to emotionally and intellectually to achieve that freedom from the tangible, cruel world, to walk through it. And I remember, my parents were always answering my questions, like even about poverty. I would ask them when we would go back home to Bangladesh, and, it's a place unlike any other, where it's third world, and the sounds and sights and smells and everything. It's a saturation of information you won't get anywhere else, like the sewage and the calls from the beggars and the kind of physical landscape, like the images you're seeing of the nearly dead and the starving and the poor and in rags, like and there are beggars everywhere. And it starts like the moment you get off the airplane, you're hit with this heat, and it's like sitting inside of a mouth.
Wow.
And you see you see droves of people just watching the foreigners come out of the airport, because we are aliens. We are this kind of reminder of a world beyond. That's what foreigners are.
Yeah.
And so people, and you just see thousands and thousands of bodies. Like, we are a tiny, overpopulated country.
Wow.
And so you get into the car, and because of the poor urban planning, the car moves. It takes 4 hours to make a 10-mile drive, kind of thing. And there are beggars running up to you at all times, and people with amputees and polio survivors, and so I was fortunate in that I was exposed to all of this from such a younger age. From the time I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I would always ask questions and my parents would answer. And
no honeymoon period.
No honeymoon period. And I also remember that in Bangladesh, being aware of, there's something about being a girl or a woman. Apparently, we're not supposed to be doing certain things that my brother is allowed to do, or my father is allowed to say. I'm supposed to wear different clothes in Bangladesh than I am as a young girl in Thailand. I remember having just like very elementary thoughts, like ever since I was 6 years old, like, oh, there's something about me being female that means that the world wants me to behave differently. There's a different set of rules that I'm supposed to abide by. And in Bangladesh, women and men live very much separate lives, where even in social gatherings, we're put into different rooms.
Wow.
Because, men are going to be talking about politics and literature and art and government, and women are expected to talk about childcare, caretaking and cooking. And God forbid we were put into the same room, because that infers that we would have things to talk about on the same level of intelligence.
So you've obviously bucked against that in your life. And so, one of the things you said that got a great laugh from the crowd. And when you were introducing your piece at Burnt Tongue, you were asking if you were close enough to the microphone, if people could hear you. And people are saying, get a little closer. And you said, well, I'm going to get louder. And then you said, I usually say that at the beginning of relationships too, right? And that made us all crack up as a kind of warning, you know, that the timidity is not something that people are going to experience with you. And so I guess I wonder, I mean, there's no question from me why you started to buck against that. But has your family, has your parents responded? Like, what do your mother and father think of the fact that you don't just go to you're not just going to go to the room with the women and talk about childcare? Have they accepted that aspect?
They have. Absolutely. My parents are very supportive of not just what I do, but who it is I am.
Okay.
And yes, we have. My father and I used to butt heads when I was younger because I think it is very intimidating to be faced with this young girl child who is adamantly against.
The program,
yes, who's not about to abide by the rules, and.
I bet secretly he was happy.
Well, we've gone back and forth, and it's a relationship, right? And so it has been a lifelong growing process and learning process, and we are definitely we're now closer than we have ever been.
Wow.
And that has been a lot of work.
I bet.
Yeah, and the book is I'm Yours has so much about that relationship because it is, my relationship with my father, like my relationship with my mother, two biggest contributing influences, right?
I've heard you speak about your mother's influence on your art and life and how profound that is. The sacrifices she made to allow you to pursue some of the things you pursued.
And being an outspoken girl, I think all of those experiences that I would have when I was observing that women were being told to speak less or to speak at all, right? And it has just been more fuel for my fire and informed and shaped like who it is I'm supposed to be and my purpose. And I remember, when I was 11 years old, a memory really sticks out, which is I remember finding out about a cousin of mine. He had been molesting a lot of my cousins. And he was one of the oldest in our group of cousins. And another cousin told me that, this is what he does. And I remember, so I was 11 when I was told that. And I remember, but my entire life, always sensing that he did that because through survival instinct that children have, I would always leave the room whenever he entered. If I was there by myself reading or drawing and he would come into a room, I would make sure I would either leave or just call out like, Mama, I need your help with something. Because I could always sense it the way that farmers sense an incoming storm and they know to cover their crops against danger. I always knew he was a storm. And then I was told of, what he would do, and I remember getting, of course, so furious. And I went to the patriarch of our family to let him know this was happening and that, of course, he must take action. And the patriarch told me, boys will be boys. Don't be foolish. Boys will be boys. And it happens especially between cousins. And if I had managed to remain innocent at all, up till that moment, that was my final, any tiny trace that was left over of innocence left. It felt like I swallowed a piece of myself.
Terry Tempest Williams says at one point the price of obedience had become too high.
Yes, exactly. And I remember having such a pivotal moment in my development which was, he's not going to speak, so I must. I will be a voice for those without one. And that sentence has been not only my vow, but it's also been a faith that has kept me protected. Anytime something bad has happened in my life, and there have been doozies, that sentence, this almost irrational belief or irrational amount of faith in this belief that I have to be a voice for others has kept me alive and has kept me going. And, you know, I think there is a fine line between insanity and faith, or insanity and art. You have to believe so much in order to keep going. And whether that's beautiful or insane, it really doesn't matter as long as you keep going. And it is moments like that and sentences like that that have just actually helped me keep going.
Yeah, I've heard you talk, and we're coming to the end of our time, but I've heard you talk about wanting to use your art as a force for others. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what you learned in your time as a model and an actress, and how that's influenced the work you do now, and what you took from it, and maybe some of the negative things you took from it as well.
Right.
You want to speak to in terms of the work you're doing about agency.
Sure, absolutely.
Identity.
I mean, again, it was almost, you know, like you have to hit rock bottom to really then take action. And in a way, like those final years of acting and modeling where I felt, I had entered it thinking, okay, I'm going to be a voice for those without one, and acting is such a beautiful way to give life to stories that would otherwise go unheard. But then I was just parroting and reciting words assigned to me. You know? And my voice, my own voice was in the process totally silenced. And especially as a model, you know, at first it just became like, okay, I would tell myself, oh, you know, it's a means to an end.
Sure.
But after a while, and I went through a marriage and a divorce in my mid-20s, and it was as if once my ex-husband and I separated, it's as if I turned a corner I couldn't reroute, and the things I had previously rationalized and tolerated, I no longer could. And so being an actress and a model for companies or products or for stories that I did not believe in felt intolerable. Like I just could not do it anymore. And I would, you know, one of my final modeling auditions, I remember just being sardined in this room with dozens and dozens and dozens of other young, docile, obedient, malleable, pretty faces. And we were all there to be expressionless and human hangers, human mannequins, right? And I remember looking at the sheer volume of us, the sheer number of us, and it was such proof that pretty girls are a dime a dozen. We are mass produced and mass consumed. And it was for a car commercial. You know, we were all vying to be the hot girl in front of the car. Because nothing proves fancy car than a hot girl in front of it, right? Because you're selling the lifestyle or the promise, right? Exactly. And I remember just thinking like, oh my gosh, and everyone was so impressionable, and you know, nobody knows of our unoriginality and our replaceability more than the pretty girl. We know that we are a dime a dozen. We know that in a few years we're going to be replaced, and that our time to sell is now. And that's why you could smell desperation in those rooms. Because the competitiveness and the fear of time is ticking, and versus like in the arts, you grow with age. Your work gets better. As a craftsperson, you grow better. But in things like modeling, you depreciate. You know, your value depreciates
as soon as you go off the lot.
Right. It's like, and you're just replaced. And of course, being in those, doing that as so many hours of my day, you know, I was just the pursuit and the maintenance and the monetization of physical beauty was all I did, and that bled into, and not just physical beauty, but about being pleasing and malleable for other people based on what they wanted me to be, and that invariably bled into the way I created romantic relationships. You know, I used to be this very confident, strong, brave teenager and young adult, but towards the end of my 20s, I saw myself becoming more and more this shell of a woman, shell of a girl who would just become this very obedient puppet, pretty puppet for whoever she was dating or whoever she was hired by. And, you know, that car commercial audition was the last one I ever went to. It was the only one I ever, no, it was for a sexy spy or something. Anyway, one of those, right? And it's the only audition in my entire life that I left before they called my name. And I bought a one-way ticket to Oregon, and because my mom and my stepdad live here, and I recognized also, like, I had not only gotten myself to this place because of my choices, I was also severely anorexic then as well, because it's self-punishment constantly. And so if you're living as, if you're hired to be a shell of a person, it's going to only encourage any other self-sabotage you're doing, right? And it all just enforces each other. And anorexia is, it's a byproduct. It's a natural side effect of being raised as a girl in this world, you know?
No kidding.
And that's, you know, there was a lot of, there was that, there was my present day thing that was happening, you know, as a 29-year-old. And then I realized also I had all these wounds stacked up from my childhood and my teens that I'd never truly taken care of. So all of that together, I just needed to take stock of all of it and heal it and reclaim it. And I just became convinced that writing a book would achieve all of those things.
Amazing.
Yeah, and thank you. And it's, you know, it probably, you can hear also even more now why the work that I'm trying to do now, taking it out to young girls in colleges, in high schools, that it is not your physical beauty or the pursuit and procurement of the perfect man that is your biggest muscle group. Your strongest muscle is your voice. It's your resilience. It is your determination to author your life on your terms. And when if you can do that from an early age, oh my gosh, you will live an extraordinary life. Or if you have to if you have to pause and start doing that in your late 20s or your 30s or whenever, you can still have an extraordinary life. What's important is that at some point you recognize what the true muscle is. And what are you, and to ask, like, what are we preoccupied with? And what should we replace those preoccupations with? What are the priorities I am shaping myself around? And what can I replace them with so that I'm not living as an unhealthy shell, but instead a fully cooked, fully realized person?
Reema Zaman, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for being an agent of light and of creativity and transformation.
Thank you so much.
We're going to put links to your website. If there's publisher folks out there that want to see the manuscript, they can contact you and your agent through your site.
That would be wonderful.
If people want to see the other work that you're doing, see the clips of some of your readings, the burnt tongue one, or submit some stuff to Dear Reema, they can get all of that to your website. Right. And if they want to book you for this program that you've just been talking about, they can contact you there as well, correct?
Yes, they can. And I'm the same on every channel. Reema Zaman, you know, reemazaman.com, Reema Zaman on Instagram, Reema Zaman on Facebook, and everything is public and open and inviting.
As we go out, before the show ends, people are going to hear one more piece from you, and I wonder if you can just set it up, and then the show will close, and then we'll get that piece from you. But the piece is, how does one heal the reaping? And if you can just maybe tell us a little bit about where that came from,
right? And
then we'll close, and then we'll get that.
Yeah.
So where did that piece emerge?
Well, how does one heal the reaping is an essay I wrote that I wrote, you know, in response to the election results. I had started writing it actually during my workshop with Lydia, Exhausting Metaphor, because she had asked us a question of what color what color are you, or what color would you be? And one of the things I had started saying when you did ask me about that workshop was, it was my first time ever being in a room full of other writers.
Yeah.
And then also, I was the only person in the room who answered in the way I did, because I was the only woman of color there.
Interesting.
And which is usually the case, for me. And I'm used to it. I don't attach any negative or positive thing to it. It's just I'm used to it. Like I said, I've been a foreigner in every setting I've ever been in.
So this is par for the course.
Yeah. And even, like we were talking about in modeling, it's always the wild card. And there's a benefit to it, because if you are different or seen as a minority in any way, people have a lot of assumptions about who it is you are. And so you just get to observe all of this, and you get to be a social scientist, Anyway, so this essay, is, I guess, the best way to describe it is to read it.
Yeah, actually, we go ahead and close the show, and then people will hear it after the music.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And I really want to thank you for this amazing honor and opportunity to talk with you.
Well, we've all been enriched by it, and thank you for the art that you're doing.
Thank you.
We'd love to have you on again in the future to hear how things are going.
I would love that so much.
You've been listening to On the Block Radio, folks. Our guest has been Reema Zaman. Please come to our site to get links to hers to see all of the relevant and transformative projects she has going on. This is Andy Gervich, and we will see you on the other side. Strange days have found us. Strange days have tracked us down. They're going to destroy our cash. You will join. We shall go on playing or find a new town.
Hello, my name is Lydia Yuknovich, and you're listening to On the Block Radio.
How does one heal the reaping? I am my own. I run through these woods, cocooned in somber reflection. Known and seen only by the trees, my limbs pulse with hard-won agency. How sublime to be safe from the wet-hot suck of others. How luxurious to be preoccupied solely by role and design I assign myself. At 33, I've begun to feel the occasional ache in my knees and lower back. 3 decades of committed motion will have that effect. I meld well with the wood's palette. My color is that of my skin, the only hue I've ever desired. It defies name, for I cannot be rooted in place. The most accurate description is, I am my own. When you are anything but Caucasian, the frequency with which others remind you of your difference ensures you cannot forget your alleged otherness, which is the mechanism behind exoticism of any kind. You only know otherness if you're told of it. If you allow, the pieces of you become politicized. It is then on you to regain authorship. Fall delivers the uncanny. In the leaves we witness both sunrise and sunset. We fall to our knees, humbled by majesty we can never replicate, only exalt. Like the trees through which I run, my skin shifts with the seasons. I move through honey to caramel to amber to toasted sesame. During my 20s, as a girl, as a new immigrant, as an actress, my skin existed only as extension, as determined by others, by their nearness, their graze, their decree. We're looking for someone lighter. You don't fit with the cast lineup. Such were the waking hours. Self-preservation demanded disassociation, the slicing of self to trade as commodity. In the evenings, my skin would be that which pleased, landscaped, licked clean, paradoxically in the process, dirtied, Him, then him, each man burrowing with such fervor, furrowed brow, clenched jaw, knotted heart, foraging through my pieces, kidnapping any errant bit he could to spackle his jagged form, as if the harvest could complete him. Scrolling down and along the walls like the stock exchange, sprinted my orphan self. What is the way forward when one's pieces are taken, rewritten, or threatened extinction by a person, a country, an ideal? How does one heal the reaping? I run, fueled by a fire sourced and sustained within, lit from a wick only I match. I run, remembering that in the deepest ink of night, the one thing we can each claim is sovereignty over our sense of self. I run and I recover the taken, that misplaced, the surrendered. How I adore that word, recover, to retrieve, to unearth, to heal. Each day, I lay to rest what needs tender burial, hopes that have been pierced, losses that haunt, characters I no longer need, or those I love but cannot have. Today, I lay first to rest a miscarried daughter. With crystalline certainty, I know she looks identical to me, which is to say, identical to my mother. We women, ours are a fierce thread. Every feature makes sure to emerge. Miscarry. How like Western medicine to invent such a word. Through a pert trio of syllables, it paints blame, to say a woman failed to handle, perform correctly. Beside her, I lay down another memory that, though I healed a long while ago, re-emerged to hunt me this past month. A memory of a night at age 23 when I was raped. One of the luckier ones. My assault was swift. My rapist was economical with time, pain, and me. After his illegal acquisition, I sat in the dark for 15 minutes listing my options and weighing the cost of each. Back then, I was on my OPT visa. If I accrued enough professional credits, I could, hopefully, obtain a green card. To negotiate any legal retribution for rape is a brutal ordeal for any woman, any nationality. The fine print of my immigrant status claimed I am, not to be treated any differently than an American woman, but often the fine print fails to inform reality. Similarly, the minutiae behind immigration included nothing to suggest pressing charges against a rapist could compromise my status or my future application for permanent residency. But all it would take was for my case to land in the hands of that one deciding authority who found pleasure in turning the innocuous into injury. I had been working, and I continue to work so hard to live in America. I loved then, and I continue to love this country beyond words. I haven't a place in Bangladesh, but here, in the United States, I can pursue the life I want, to be a voice for those without one. Thus, that evening, I decided I would not harm my chances for living here. The irony was acutely painful. I had to be quiet then to be a voice for others later. What hurt most was the fact that my silence would allow my rapist the wicked freedom to assault other women. The thought of hypothetical others branded me with guilt. Today, I am a permanent resident of the United States of America. I am not a citizen, but I will be soon. Today, next to that evening from 10 years ago, I lay to rest last night. November 8th, 2016, the howl of our collective anguish. I stand for a while by its invisible tomb, feeling both alone yet tethered, tiny yet enormous. While this latest loss feels similar to any one of life's greatest wounds, it feels significantly different. All around me, I feel the shimmering presence of brothers and sisters. Mourning our tragedy, standing today in our connected conviction that we will bury and honor what needs rest, and then rise anew. I breathe, swelling with this feeling of togetherness so big, sacred, and comforting. I close my eyes and I reunite my fractured selves. I claim skin, limbs, lips, hair, identity. No longer things to alienate, demean, monetize, or consume. Simply mine and part of a grander choice. I know now more than ever that we either orphan or own our truth. Our disappointments and lashes will never fully mute us. Rather, There are invitations to speak. Fall reminds us that from decay we grow. The grim truth behind loss is that with each one we become better at coping. As we move through the passage of time, our wounds stack. It is not that the losses dull or lessen each other. What happens is each blow is like that of a blacksmith's hammer, pummeling iron. Each hit fortifies our metal. No group knows this better than women. We are privy to unique grief, singular hostility. Thus, forged in fire, we are all the more prepared and capable for leadership, resilience, grit. We know, despite and in the name of our many shocks, the few things we do have are paramount. We have autonomy over sense of self. We have the choice to persevere. We remain, as ever, voices for those without one. I bid my ache to sleep with the lullaby my inner voice has recited to me my entire life, from the time I was a toddler. I love you. I am here. I am yours. With that, my losses rest. With that, I run. I repeat again our song, adding a new refrain. I love you. I am here. I am yours. I am my own.
You've been listening to On the Block Radio with Andrew Gurovich. The show is produced in Portland, Oregon by Michael DiNapoli at MD Productions. Theme music by Moving the Mountain. Closing music by Jonathan Oak. Look us up on the web at ontheblockradio.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to tune in next week for a brand new episode. Previous episodes can be found on our website. Thanks for listening.
Oh, you're beautiful kitty kitties. Oh, look at you out there. Beauty like a bolt, light in a darkened hallway. New minds, looking at this world, at our lives, with the perspective of apocalypse children. Standing dusty in the barren highways, standing broken before the fathers who were meant to make us whole, but who only lied to us about what it meant to be a man, about what it meant to be a woman, about what it meant to be